What's up, guys? It's Talon. Today we're going to go over the patch notes. As I said, I'm going to start making patch note reviews, where then this is kind of a supplement to my meta report videos. So if you guys watch my meta report video, you know how I currently feel about the meta. And then each patch I'll explain how it's been changed a bit or will be changed by this new patch or my opinions on it. I'm going to rate the patch overall in terms of like my thoughts on how good of a patch I think it is, from like F to A rating. And then alongside that, again, we'll make a meta report video every 1 to 2 months to kind of follow up. So getting right into the changes, first we have Rengar's new rework. We're just going to talk over some of the things that happen. I'm not going to necessarily go over every small detail. I'm just going to explain to you guys the general things and where this is going to fit into the kind of the game. So initially, Rengar's base stats are being increased. His damage is being increased, his health and armor as well. Then onto his passive. So now it says if Rengar does not gain ferocity from his basic attacks, and at less than 4 ferocity, he gains 1 ferocity instantly. So I think this means if you get a ferocity by using an ability, then you immediately get a second one, and you only don't get it if you use an attack. I think that's what that means, but I will test that once the rework actually comes out, so we'll see. And then he also now gets movement speed by casting any empowered ability instead of that being on his second ability now. And then all of the ferocity stacks that he has will reset after 8 seconds. And then again, he's getting some more damage on this ability or on this passive as well. Quick note, guys, that passive damage is actually only increasing in the early game or for your first couple takedowns, but in your last takedown, it is actually going to be a bit less damage. So it's going to be a little bit better early game, the passive, but later game, once you get all 5 takedowns, it's not going to be quite as good. And then Savagery now, which is his first ability. So now the first basic attack that he does will crit, whereas before, I think it was just kind of bonus damage. It also deals 60% damage to turrets, and then again the damage on this one is getting buffed. And then alongside that, we also have Battle Roar, which is the second ability, the one that heals as well. And now if the target dealing damage to you is a monster, then you restore 100% health instead of, I think, 60% health is what the normal one, but it was just based on anything. So now I think it's going to be better for, killing jungle, like a Baron, for example, really quickly, or killing objectives and stuff like that. But against champions, it's probably still going to be just the same as it was before. And then they did remove the movement speed from here because it kind of got put into then the passive there. After that, we have his third ability, where now casting it on someone will reveal them. So that's actually kind of nice too. It'll be a bit better for when people are playing around bushes for kind of catching them out. You can also cast it during the leap, and then again, the damage is getting buffed on this one as well. And then lastly, his ultimate cooldown is getting lowered, and the movement speed is being increased. So what does this all mean in terms of Rengar? Well, Rengar is definitely going to go stronger in the meta now. Like this, there's a lot of good changes that I do feel are definitely going to make him quite a bit better. Will he fit into the very top of the meta? I don't quite think so. It's hard for me to, judge before we see this rework in action. I would say he feels like he's going to be in that like kind of A tier range of champions where he's not quite hitting those Riven Vi level of champions. We'll speak about how Viego's not really going to be in there anymore potentially, but I do think that he will still be really good in those meta with this rework. Okay, so the Rengar rework took a bit longer to talk about, but most of these other changes aren't going to take quite so long. So for Wukong, he got a base health increase, and then the damage on his first ability is increased for the second, third, and fourth level by the base amount of damage for that ability. So this is a very minor change. It's going to make him a bit better. Perhaps he's going to have better trading and better stats in lane phase. He's going to be able to get a bit better damage up on Q. I do think that in top lane, this will make him a bit better than in jungle. I still think, obviously, it's a buff in both lanes. Overall, this doesn't really change his place in the meta too much. He's still a lower tier champion who kind of falls behind the other types of bruisers like Vi, Riven, in the jungle, and a lot of the best top lane champs like Renekton and the other bruiser, they kind of just outshine him in the top end jungle. So overall, still not a great champion in the meta, but this does make him a bit better. Okay, so then Zyra is getting a buff on her plants and also a buff on her first ability. So both of these buffs also impact her AP scalings. They're both increasing more with her AP scaling, so she's going to be quite a bit stronger the later on in the game you go because of this additional AP scaling on these two, this passive and this ability. So I do think that she'll be a bit stronger in the game. I still think a lot of the other mages are going to be better than her in the mid lane, and in support, I don't think Zyra is necessarily the strongest pick because she doesn't have as much utility. So I would still say she's not going to be the best champion, but she is a rather annoying champion who still is really good at bursting people down. And in the late game, she will scale quite nicely with this change. So again, not a ton of changes, but it is, more impactful, I would say, than the Wukong change in terms of Zyra's new place in the meta. Okay, guys, so next is an Akshan buff. So Akshan is getting more armor on his base stats and more magic resist, so he's going to be a bit tankier overall. And then his first ability damage is getting increased in the late game. and the damage to minions is getting slightly decreased in the early game, but increased in the late game. So generally, they're trying to make his late game stronger, and they're doing a pretty good job of this. I do think that this will make him a bit stronger in the late game. And then his, I think his third ability is the swing, where now it does 150% instead of 125% from crits, and the critical damage with Infinity Edge is going from 155 to 180%. So, you know, crit on this champion is going to be a lot better, and he's going to be better in the late game. I honestly have always thought that Akshan's kind of an underrated champion if you're good on him. His lane phase is so goddamn strong, and now that he's going to be a bit stronger in the late game, which is usually where he struggles, I do think this champion is going to be a bit underrated in the meta if you know what you're doing. Now, he is a bit hard to learn, but if you do take the time to learn him, I definitely think, especially as a counter to Kassadin and a lot of weaker early game mid laners, he's going to be very strong right now. Okay, so then we have a Seraphine nerf. So for her second ability, her heal and shield ability, the cooldown is going to be longer on levels 2, 3, and 4, and then the healing is going to be decreased based on your health loss. Now it's going to be going down to 5% from 7.5%. So this is a decent little nerf, you know, making her shield a bit less strong. So this champion became really strong in China. It's been super popular, being played a lot lately. You don't see it as much here in North America, but it is relatively strong. I feel like a little bit underrated champion. So this nerf, it's nothing crazy. She's still going to be really good. She's going to be a good champion overall with that kind of enchanter build that people go. But this will, you know, impact her a bit, make her a little bit weaker in the meta, though won't have too large of an impact overall. And little correction, I meant to say heal, not shield. But yeah, anyways, let's get into Urgot. The Urgot nerf is pretty straightforward. They just nerf the damage a little bit on his second ability. Honestly, not going to have a big impact on him. Obviously, he's going to be a bit weaker. He's going to be a bit less oppressive in lane. But as a whole, I don't really think this changes his place in the meta. I still think he's a really strong laner who's still pretty tanky in the late game and a pretty strong champion overall. Okay, now guys, we're in my favorite part of the entire patch. They are nerfing Viego. You guys have no idea how badly I want this champion nerfed. And it might not be for the reason you think. The reason I want Viego nerfed is because he's banned every game that I play in, and I love playing this champion. I want to play this champion more, but he's always banned and I can never play him. So I'm really hoping that this nerf makes people less likely to ban this champion so I can finally freaking play this champion. But anyways, getting into the actual nerf, so he's getting less armor per level, so he's going to be a bit worse into AD champions. They're nerfing his first ability quite a bit, so now it's going to do less % health damage, the passive basic attack will, which is quite a bit. You know, nerfing that down by a percentage point on each level of that is going to be rather large because he's not going to do as well in the tanky champions now from this. Additionally, the damage of his second auto attack from when he uses his first ability, then he auto attacks twice. That second auto attack is going to do less damage based on your AD now, so it's not going to have as good of AD scaling. And then they're also nerfing his active damage on the first ability, so just the actual first ability damage is now not going to scale as well with crit as it did before. So they're kind of nerfing that crit Viego build because that was really the build that was kind of taking over on Viego. And then lastly, they're nerfing his ultimate. The cooldown on the first and second level of it are going to be higher now. And additionally, they're also nerfing that scaling with the crit. So now crit Viego is going to be a little bit worse, and he's going to have less damage overall. Now, I still think he's going to be an incredibly strong champion because the biggest reason that Viego is so strong is that he's able to get level 4 before Scuttle and has incredibly fast clear speed, which allows him to then get level 5 really quickly, and then allows him to snowball the game through there, usually getting a reset, getting 1 or 2 kills in the early game really easily, and then snowballing from there. But the crit Viego build is going to be worse, which means he's going to have less overall damage. I would say this kind of maybe we'll take him down from that tier of champions with Riven, Vi, and Lee Sin, and maybe he'll be now right kind of below those champions in the meta. I think it's possible that he still stays on top with those champions as well, but I think he's kind of getting more brought in line with the rest of the champs. So does he need to be a permaban anymore? Maybe not, but he's still definitely going to be extremely strong and still a perfectly reasonable ban if you feel like banning this champion, because he definitely can be annoying to deal with as a whole. Okay, so then we have Kayn, who's getting a base armor buff. He's getting more energy from dealing damage to melee champions, which makes it easier to get his red form. More energy from taking down champions, which just makes it easier to get form in general. And then he's going to have some health regen increased as well on the passive there. And then his first ability is also getting buffed. And the way that his first ability is getting buffed is just going to be dealing a bit more damage there. And then his ultimate's also getting a bit more regen. So Kayn here kind of felt like an average champion in the meta, and frankly, I mean, this doesn't change too much. It's a little easier to get form. I'm not exactly sure how much easier this makes it to get form exactly. I'm not really a huge Kayn player. Maybe this makes him slightly stronger, but I still feel like he's going to be in a similar spot in the meta, just kind of average, outshone by some of the top champs, but still definitely a decent champion to carry games with if you're confident on him. So I feel like that's kind of still how he's going to be in the meta overall. Okay, so now on to some of the item changes. So Mortal Reminder and Serylda's Grudge are both getting increase late game. So now going from 16 to 30% armor pen to now 16 to 33% armor pen, depending on the game. So I don't really think this changes when you build Mortal Reminder or Cerulda's Grudge. I just think that now once you do build it, it's going to be slightly stronger. So not a huge change for these items, but it is a little bit helpful as well. And here's one of my favorite changes of the patch as well. They're changing Redemption to an item from an enchant, which I like because Redemption wasn't really used much as an enchant. So it's going to be 2,600 gold, give you 400 health, 300 mana, and 20 ability haste. And then it's going to basically have the passive where it heals ally units in the range of 350, which is a decent little range. Nothing huge, but not a bad range, for 50 plus 6% bonus health every 8 seconds. And then obviously if no one's around, then it won't trigger this passive. And so I think this passive is going to be really good on tank supports and as well enchanter supports. I think it's going to be a pretty decent item. I'm excited to try it out and see what we think about it, but it's a decent supportive item to kind of play around your teammates and heal them up pretty frequently. I think it'll be best built into poke champions because of that healing. And yeah, overall feels like a strong item. And then also has the Eternity passive where it will restore mana equal to 15% of the damage taken from champions. And then when you consume mana, it will restore health equal to 20% of the mana consumed. So it's kind of, again, going to make you a bit tankier. So overall, this redemption item, I'm very interested to try it out, and it seems really cool. Okay, so then Ardent Censer is getting a pretty decent buff. So the AP that you get is going to go down a bit from 60 to 55, but you get 10 extra ability haste, so now going to 20 total ability haste. Alongside that, the passive is now going to give you, when you heal or shield an ally champion, 15 to 40% attack speed instead of 10 to 30%. And then it's going to give a 20 to 40 bonus magic damage on their basic attacks as well. So it's going to be a better item for buffing your teammates now, and I think overall is going to be definitely buffed for sure. Always, still going to be built in the same spots, on these enchanter champions when you have a lot of auto attackers. But it is going to feel nice, so these enchanters are going to be buffed, which I don't know why we're buffing enchanters, but hey, it'll be pretty strong, so we'll see how that works. Okay, so now we have Shield Bow, and Shield Bow is both getting cheaper, and now the passive is no longer going to require as much crit. It's not going to be based on crit, the shield. So again, going from 3,200 to 3,000 gold to buy it, and then now when you get put below 35% max health, the shield is just going to be anywhere from 250 to 550 health rather than 300 plus some damage based on crits. So this basically just means that champions who don't build full crit but still want to build this item are going to benefit a bit more. But overall, I don't think this changes too much for the passive. However, the price being 200 gold cheaper is definitely going to make it a better early game option when you're into some assassins or some dangerous champions where you just want that little bit of extra survivability on an ADC. Okay, so next up is Giant Slayer. So Giant Slayer is now going to be better into really, really tanky tanks and worse in the early game. So now, instead of it being 14% damage increase when they have up to 700 bonus health, it's now going to be a 16% increase, but up to 1600, which means that every 100 health, you get an extra percentage in terms of damage, versus you getting 2 percentages for every 100 before. However, you can get up to a higher point. So basically, I think it's overall a giant nerf to Giant Slayer. However, in the late game, it will be slightly more effective against these really tanky champions. So overall, this is now going to be a less effective item to go in, or rune rather, to go in general, because before you would pretty much always go this rune in that slot because it was just so much better than the other two options. But now Coup de Grace and Last Stand will actually have their places in the meta when you are against squishier comps, and now Giant Slayer will just be more focused around tanks. And then the final change is going to be Lethal Tempo, which is actually pretty interesting. So now it's going to give you more attack speed per stack that you get, but it's not going to have that at max stacks 40% attack speed that you used to have. And now instead at max stacks, it's going to give you additional range, more range for ranged champions, but it also gives some additional range to melee champs. So I think overall this is going to be a buff to Lethal Tempo, though I think you will get a bit less attack speed once you have it fully stacked. You're getting more attack speed as you're stacking it up, which is useful, and then that range as well is going to be especially good on lower range AD carries like Kai'Sa and Vayne, for example. So I think as a whole, AD carries are getting a pretty big buff from this change and from the change as well. The Shield Bow change and Giant Slayer not being as good into squishier champs is also going to mean that less people, I just think overall AD carries are getting quite a bit stronger on this patch due to this Lethal Tempo change especially. And so yeah, that's kind of going to do it for this video. Let me know what you thought about this format. As I said, I'm going to kind of rate the patch on a rating, and I would say going from F to A, I would say this is like a B+. I like everything in this patch. There's nothing like crazy exciting or super cool, so it's not, in that like A range. But I think this patch is great. I think the nerfs and buffs are great. I think the changes to items and runes are all super exciting, and I really like it as a whole. So yeah, again, let me know what you thought about this kind of format for a video. Again, I want this to kind of be a supplemental video to my meta report so that you guys have that meta report to speak on the general meta. And then each individual patch, I can talk about what might be changing and my thoughts on that and whatever. If you're ever interested in coaching, as always, guys, link in the description to DM me on Discord for $15 an hour for that coaching as well. I live stream frequently, so if you're ever interested in asking any specific questions or you want to leave comments, any of those types of things work out. And I'll see you guys in the next video.